What is up, everybody? I'm No Lex Given here with your afternoon snap, and today our featured location is Nova Roma. Wait a minute, that's Galactus's music.
Kneel before Galactus.
Nova Roma just helps to make combo decks that much more consistent, so that way you can draw everything that you need, and you throw in America and Kang, and you're basically Galactusing every single game. Also, Nova Roma is a completely blank location after everyone draws the cards from it, which means it is a great location to drop Galactus onto. But I'm not just playing my stock Galactus list today. I made a few changes, so let's look at those and talk about that for a second here. First things first, I cut Daredevil for Black Widow. That's for two reasons. One, I figured if I'm playing Galactus, maybe a bunch of other people are playing Galactus too, and I started to actually really like the idea of Black Widow in a Galactus list. Just limit the amount of potential options that your opponent might have to stop you. After I cut Daredevil, I decided to also cut Professor X, which could still work in the deck, but just wanted to try out something different. I also didn't want to have Professor X lose to Jeff the Baby Landshark, though that would have also been funny content. So I cut Professor and I threw in Absorbing Man. And while I'm not totally in love with that card in the deck, almost everything in the deck has an on-reveal ability, so I figured I'd give him a shot. Now, the other reason that I am playing Black Widow is it is really good against Nova Roma. So I'm gonna snap on this game on turn one, just hoping that Nova Roma is that third location. Typically, you'll wait till the first two locations reveal and then you'll snap, but I was feeling confident and it pays off here because Nova Roma has not revealed itself yet, which means it's pretty likely to be our third location. So now, Black Widow, this Widow's Bite, is not only going to deny my opponent their draw for turn, but also the draw from Nova Roma here, since my opponent is unable to draw any cards. So now I'm up 2 cards on my opponent, which sets me up pretty well for the rest of the game. I'm just gonna have so many more options than my opponent, which is going to make it really tough for them to stop me here. They just dropped the Widow's Bite on turn 3. We're going to wave to set up Galactus. We've got priority. Nothing we really have to worry about at this point. It's just where do I think my opponent is going to play their cards to, and I think they'll probably avoid Lechugia because they don't want to grab some rocks, and we already have everything that we need in our hand. So I'm dropping Galactus right there into Lechugia. Don't even know what my opponent played in Pet Mansion because we have priority this turn. So now there's only one location and I can Spider-Man it and easily win the game from there. On turn 5, let's see what my opponent plays. Probably not good enough to beat a Spider-Man. Nope, it's just a wave. So I'll actually be able to play Death and America to close this game out. But why Absorbing Man? Well, the real answer is I'm not sure. I just figured maybe it would have some cool interactions with different locations. Doesn't really work with the main curve of the deck. It can allow you to play around some things with it doubling up as a second Galactus activation. But this game, Absorbing Man definitely earned his keep. Because of Peak, I'm going to be able to drop a turn 3 Galactus, and then I'm going to be able to drop a turn 4 Spider-Man and a turn 5 Absorbing Man on that Spider-Man. My opponent is snapping here to the Peak, but they don't know what's coming. I just got to figure out where we drop him, boys. Do I want to fire it off in the Peak? Do I want to leave Mindscape as a weird mind game in this one? Ultimately, I believe I'm going to drop Galactus into that Camp Lehigh, thinking my opponent wouldn't play there this turn. They play a Sunspot, which is a little bit awkward, and then they also play a flipped Leader, copying my flipped over Galactus. So my opponent has a decent amount of power in Camp Lehigh already, but we actually have all of the tools that we need to win this game. My opponent is pretty unlikely to play a card this turn because that would mean they're no longer able to play a card for the rest of the game. So I think they're just going to double pass on Spider-Man, adding 4 power there and then 5 power there, which means we can Shang-Chi, their Sunspot. I meant to say Sunspot. I think I said Spider-Man. Well, they're passing regardless. They're double passing as we double Spider-Man them. Absorbing Man copies that Spider-Man. And it does look like I'm potentially losing here. I'm down by 6 currently, and I'm going to be down by 11 for the total of the game. But Shang-Chi will even the score. We'll take out Sunspot, and we will shrink the lizard and grab ourselves an 8-cube victory. And this is just a random silly game that I'm throwing in here. We've got Nova Roma as our first location, then X Mansion, so that's where I'm going to drop Electro because we're not going to be able to play Galactus there, and then Warrior Falls, a pretty fun location both with Dr. Octopus and with Null, and potentially even with Galactus too, depending on how this game shakes out. My opponent is going to drop their own Electro, theirs into Warrior Falls, which makes sense. If you're not playing a Galactus deck, just throw your Electro into Warrior Falls. I even thought about it too, because I know I'm going to drop my Doc in that location, but I'm glad that I didn't, because Odin is what I grabbed from the X Mansion, so now I have another free energy off of Electro. Black Bolt discards my Absorbing Man. Good job, Absorbing Man. You did your job, you got discarded, and you protected my Galactus, so I'll take it. And this turn I've got 6 energy, so now I can drop Galactus wherever I want, either into Nova Roma or Warrior Falls. And Warrior Falls just sounds like a lot of fun. We make my opponent keep their Electro, which is pretty good, and then we'll also just, I don't know, it's just fun. So let's do it. I've dropped Galactus there. See if we can figure out what my opponent played into the location this turn, into X Mansion. So you can track it with Null. So they played a card that had 3 power. Don't know exactly what that could have been, maybe a wave, but you can kind of get some information when you have Null in your hand and you drop Galactus if you're not already familiar with that interaction. I'm going to undo this. I do like that play of Black Widow plus Dr. Octopus, and it does mean that Nova Roma is relevant this game because we drew Black Widow this turn. But the reason that I like that Black Widow play, as we'll see from my opponent's Jubilee here, having smaller cards will actually make my opponent have to keep their Electro, which means that we could potentially fill them up. Now, what's going to wind up happening is Jubilee and Black Widow will be the cards that die this turn, but I still really like this play, and then, you know, some more things will die and we'll just be able to drop a big Null on the final turn. So that looks pretty good. My opponent is Jubileeing into Leader, so they are going to be able to copy our Dr. Octopus, which will drag one of these cards out from our hand. But my opponent actually deviates a little bit. Also, that's right, I forgot, Dr. Octopus stops the Jubilee. So my opponent isn't going to be able to flip over their Jubilee now, and then they actually don't go for Jubilee. They go for Wave, so now my opponent is totally bunked in Warrior Falls. Black Widow is going to be the only thing that dies this turn, and now I'm going to have free reign on the final turn. My opponent also waved, so I'll get to drop a Death and a Null and grab an easy victory. Let's look at one last game to round this video out, and Nova Roma is our first location, so we're not going to be able to use Black Widow for even more disruption in this one. I'm just going to drop it on turn 2, but we've got a reasonable curve with Electro into Titan, allowing me to play a turn for Galactus. My opponent also has the Black Widow, so that is fun. We're both kind of disrupting each other, but I already have everything I need. I've got the Electro, I've got the Galactus, and I even have Null and Absorbing Man. So we're doing a lot of stuff here. On turn 3, I'm just gonna drop Electro plus Widow's Bite, get that out of my hand. It can be really dangerous to get Black Widowed when you have an Electro in play, so that's one thing to look out for. And then we can see my opponent is actually playing a junk deck. I think that this is a reasonable choice for today, just because Black Widow is a good card today, and if you're going to play Black Widow, this is a deck that it slots well into. Now, my opponent does have priority here, just by 1, and that is enough to allow my opponent to Green Goblin me, which is unfortunate because now I don't get to blow everything up with Galactus. This would have been a great example of a time where you could Absorbing Man and then Galactus into Titan to reset the game and then just drop Null on the final turn. But because of that rock in Titan, not going to be able to do that either. So just gonna drop Dr. Octopus, and when my opponent plays Professor X, I'm not really feeling super confident about this game. I'm about ready to retreat. Let's see what my opponent has here. Spider-Woman to shrink my Dr. Octopus, and then they've got a Carnage. So they're not even bunked up in the Titan. We won't be able to steal a win there, but I'm bunked up in Wakanda. So that's gonna be a hard location for me to win. So I'm about ready to throw in the towel here, and then on the final turn of the game, my opponent snaps, and I don't have to retreat because I've got Kang, so that's pretty nice. In fact, I might even snap back here just to kind of assert some dominance and say what's up. So we're gonna drop Kang. We don't have priority, so they could Cosmo us. That is like kind of a risk, but I don't think that this deck from my opponent is typically one to play Cosmo with Debris, Black Widow, and Carnage, and Spider-Woman. Those aren't Cosmo related cards. So don't have to worry about Cosmo. We're just gonna drop the Kang into Titan and get some information on what my opponent might have for the final turn and see if we have any shot. I'm not really thinking too highly, but we could Absorbing Man, Doc Ock. That's probably not great on the final turn of the game. All we can really do is add more power to Titan, but surely my opponent will be able to grab a win in Wakanda. But they are thinking for a while here. That's because my opponent has a Sentry as one of their last 2 cards in hand. My opponent only has 2 cards in hand right now, and Sentry cannot be played in the rightmost location. So my opponent is actually potentially in a little bit of trouble this game, and if that's all they got, well, we're looking good. I can beat 10 power in Titan. I can just drop Death in Titan this turn. That will allow me to beat the Sentry, and then we'll win. We'll win the game. So, really, really silly one, I thought, just to end this video off with. I thought for sure I had no shot to win this game. Turns out my opponent did also have one other card in their hand that they could play, Viper, but they couldn't play that into Titan, or they'd risk giving me one of their big cards there. So, we get the win in a game that I thought looked really, really terrible for us. So there you go. That's why you never give up. And for today, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Lux Given. Peace.